So this time we're going to have a look at some things, and because I concentrated last time on main body garments, shall we say, I thought, well, this time we'll have a look at a few of the hat styles I make. I make pretty much anything that anybody wants. The ones that I have in stock are mostly late 15th century, again, like the rest of my clothing. And so I thought we'd start with the good. Now, I've kind of put them all out. I'm going to try and go around them in order. And in actual fact, we're not going to start with a late 15th century hat. We're going to start with the sort of later hat that I stock. So the ubiquitous Tudor flat cap. I have a lot of these in stock, made from fairly solid wool. They are £35, and they come in, say, a whole variety of different colours and so on. We also have slightly fancier Landsknecht, land knight hat. This was a very decorative style that they wore. We had just the one of those. That one's on at 95. Now, I will say, in terms of prices, for TORM Virtual Christmas, I am running a 10% off sale on everything on my Etsy shop. And if I just... She says, it's not going to do it now, is it? There we are. There is my, on the chat, there is my website and the link to the Etsy shop. And in the Etsy shop, everything is on 10% off in the hat section. And there is also free UK postage until midnight tomorrow night. So, there we go. Right, so 15th century hats. We're going to start with what I tend to refer to as the simpler ones, the cheaper end of the market. You see these in lots and lots of different pictures, images of the time. This one is an Italian style, so hence it's just on the site as Italian. Again, huge range of colours and sizes in that. All the sizes are listed on the Etsy shop, and with a vague explanation as to whether you need to order your exact hat measurement or allow a little bit of extra for comfort and ease. Okay, so that's the Italian. This is the acorn. You can see the little stalk at the top of it. You see this in lots of images of the time. They can be quite short, or they can sit extremely high. Again, there's a variety. So this will be one of the first styles of hat that I make, and I tend to call this the square hat because that's the shape it shows at the top. From about 1450 onwards, again, you see it with lots of variations. Some have the fold-up brim, and some don't, but the same basic hat style. Lots and lots of those available. Then the round hat. This is probably the most common method of construction of hat through history. This one actually we can date back to kind of Roman times. It's simply a rectangle going around the brim of the head with a circle or an oval for the top. This has lots and lots of variations. I'm looking for some options. So this one, for example, I think you can see it has the rolled up brim but with a split in it. There is also, here, freshly made this morning, one from the late 15th century that has a sort of cutaway notch in it. It's not the greatest example. We were finishing off several of those this morning while I was watching presentations. Now, this one's one of my favourites. This is taken from an image from the late 15th century, and I'm trying to think of the artist now. I had it written down the other night. But for all intents and purposes, it looks rather like a beanie hat. Very modern looking. So, what else do we have? Okay, variation on the square hat. This is taken from a portrait of Richard III. So, like the square hat, it has say, 4 panels that meet the point at the top, but it flares out so slightly more at the side. And the portrait of Richard III, he's wearing something very like that. Now, so that, one more. This one, this pleated hat, again made of a rectangle and a circle, but the circle is somewhat larger so that you pleat it into the band and it sits up like this. This is taken from two different images, one dated 1215 and the other 1430. So, you know, what goes around comes around, like most fashions. Then, so those are the simple hats. Those all retail at £15 normally, but as I say, there's 10% off in the Etsy shop right now. Then on to some variations. So this is my new style. This is what I've been working on recently. And again, made of the 4 panels, you can see the cross there at the top. And tall like the acorn, but much more shaped. So it sits, if I'll show you top of my head, kind of comes in like that and then starts to go up. And you see this in a lot of images from the 15th century, with or without the pointy acorn, and sometimes even taller than this again. So this, if you can see the detail, in order to get it to hold its shape, I've felled down the seams to give a bit of extra strength. This one's a little bit more expensive than the simple variety. These will be 25. These are not yet in the shop because I've only actually made a couple of examples so far. Now, next one, similar sort of thing. Again, the 4 panels, but you see some with a band of fur around the bottom, particularly on older men or wealthier men of the time. This is actually beaver fur. So those are normally 25, but in the shop currently with 10% off. Where are we up to? Felt hats. You see, again, a lot of this style in images. I have 2 heights. I have the tall one and the slightly shorter one, and those are 25 each. Now, one of my favourite sorts, the bag hat. Simple, very simple, bag shaped, but you roll up the brim to the right size and you put it on the head and you wear it anywhere you like, whether folding forwards, folding backwards. Again, you see them in lots of images. They tend to be thought of as the poor man's chaperon. I probably ought to explain the chaperon first. Chaperons started out life as hoods, but somebody thought to change the way round. So this is the cape part that normally goes around the shoulders. This is the face hole rolled up a bit, and the liripipe that hangs down the back now hangs over the side. So again, massive variety of those in stock at the moment. Chaperons are 45, bag hats, being simpler, are only 25. And of course, we have hoods, lots of hoods. In fact, I discovered while I was sorting out the room to get everything out for this display that I had a whole box of hoods I didn't know about. So plenty of choice on the Etsy shop right now. So that's pretty much the men's styles. I'm going to do a bit of jiggery pokery with the laptop, which, by the way, is actually balanced currently on one of Simon's writing slopes. It makes the perfect laptop holder when you need it to be up high. So there we go. Right, so is that clear to everybody? Thumbs up if it is. Brilliant, thank you. Right, so ladies' hats. Where to start? I might as well start with my own head, I guess. I'm wearing a linen cap. It's very simple. It has a band at the front and a triangle at the back, and the ends of the triangle come round and wrap at the top of the head. And you see this in images everywhere, in the second half of the 15th century, right through into the early part of the 16th century. It is the kind of everyday wear for a woman. Simple to put on, very easy to take off. And I have these. These are, where are they in fact? These are 20, again, with 10% off currently. And they essentially, they form this shape. This is the bit that goes over the head, tied together at the back of the head. And then this triangle comes and wraps around and ties up and over the top of the head. Very simple, very easy to take on and off. The head rail, which is this sort of the most basic one, is essentially a square of linen hemmed and tied round the head in a variety of different ways. And pretty much anything goes. They form the basis underneath a variety of other different sorts of headdresses, particularly the ladies' hoods, which I'll come on to in a minute. You tie that on, neaten it off. You can tie it in a bun at the back of the head. You can tie the other ends up around the top like this one currently is. You can put other veils on top of it again. It forms a nice secure basis underneath everything else. These are hand stitched, completely hand stitched, and so, again, looking for the camera, whether you can see that, probably not. No, not to worry, but they are completely hand stitched. Those are 30. Now, over the top of those, you might wear a hood. I'm going to show you this one first. This is a button style, so this is very similar in general shape to the men's hoods I showed you a minute ago, except that it's not quite as full. It doesn't come down as far, and it doesn't actually, despite the fact that it's got buttons and buttonholes at the front, it doesn't actually fasten at the front of the neck. You always see it hanging open, and you would pin it to the tightly tied head rail underneath. There is an earlier 14th century version which doesn't have the fake fastenings, which aren't actually fake. They are real buttonholes, but you don't do it up. But this was a slightly later variation, and they can have either a very short liripipe or a much longer one. You see lots of images with both. And those hoods are 35. Now, the other one that you see is the gathered hood. I don't know whether this will make a lot of sense on this. Excuse the slightly strange display. The gather goes at the back of the neck, and you tie, in fact, let me see if I can do it on top of what I'm currently wearing without knocking it all off. That simply goes on over the top and pins sort of somewhere over the ears, keeps it nice and in position and doesn't blow off in the wind. And that bit of gather at the back of the neck just keeps the wind off and keeps you beautifully warm. Those are, again, 35 because they are completely hand stitched. Right, now, going up in status into the hennin, which wasn't called a hennin at the time. They referred to it as a bonnet, but they called all sorts of things bonnets, and bonnets to us mean something else entirely now, so we call it the hennin. But if we start at the beginning, underneath the hennin, you might wear a tightly tied head rail because you need something to anchor it all to, and not everybody has hip length, thick, glossy hair that they can stick pins through it into. So underneath, but a head rail can be a bit bulky, and a simple fillet is much easier. This is something we don't see an awful lot of through history, except that we sort of know it's there. And into the 15th century, you see a lot of images with this little black loop on the forehead. And we think that that loop is attached to the fillet. So that if it all starts to slip backwards, especially on the continental hennins, which are the really long ones, the weight of it could very easily pull backwards. So that loop there just enables you to tug it forward. We think that's what it's for. We don't really know for certain. These are made of velvet. These are cotton velvet, simply because silk velvet's very difficult to get. But the velvet kind of grips your hair, which stops everything slipping. These would ordinarily be tied with ties at the back of the neck. I've cheated ever so slightly, and that's actually elastic, but shh, you'll see it. So the fillets are £20. Then we have the hen themselves. In this country, we didn't wear the full cone so much. Certainly there's very little English imagery anyway, but certainly what we have shows ladies wearing a truncated hennin. And that sits sort of facing backwards like that, not upright, but backwards in that fashion to the back of the head. Over the top of that, you might have frontlets, you might have veils, you might have butterfly wires. And I can show you all of those different ones. So these are the silk covered hennins, and those normally retail at 125, but again, there's 10% off in the Etsy shop. And I have those in a variety of sizes and a variety of different silk covers. It's all English silk. And let me show you some more examples. So we talked about the wires. You see this, lift the veil off. There is a pair of brass wires folded, pinned, or sewn on, and then with a veil over the top, and that gives extra height. And this is an affectation, I guess, that says I couldn't possibly be doing a job of work wearing something as daft as this. But you see this in a lot of images. And these veils, this is silk page, but it's incredibly fine and incredibly see-through. And I have these for sale by themselves, £20. They are hand hemmed, though not by me. Life is too short, frankly. So I have a couple of those. I have a variety, like I said, of different sizes of hennins in the silk covered. I also have some, but not very many, wool felt hennins. I'm hoping to get more stock, but with one thing and another, it's just hasn't yet happened. So limited sizes, rather limited colours, but very solid wool felt. Right. I think, surprisingly, that's more or less all of them. Have I missed any? Have I missed any prices? Don't think so. Any questions?
You've got a question. Do you do Viking hats, Jackie?
Not yet. Is the question to that one? Is the answer to that one? I'm not. Viking is not. It's a little earlier than my kind of area of expertise. Although I'm always learning and I'm always happy to learn. And basically, if someone can show me a picture of something, I can make it. In fact, actually, there's an example. This is not a Viking hat, but an example of things that I make. So, as you've seen, the base shape for the hennins that I've done so far, somebody wanted, actually, Tewkesbury Museum wanted a much longer, narrower hennin. So I took the basic premise of it and I made one from scratch. Silk covered. It's supposed to represent Margaret of Anjou. Again, it will have veils and all sorts of things. But yes, pretty much anything that you would like and can show me an image for, I can recreate it. If you need me to do the research as well, that's got to be factored in. But yeah, certainly the making of it, there is very little I couldn't turn my hands to if it's made out of cloth of some sort. Oh, a very nice compliment from Red Dog Forge about the durability of the things that I've made. In fact, I mean, the hat that he was wearing earlier, the things that he was wearing earlier, but the hat very noticeably is one of my round hats. I spotted that and smiled. Yes, things are
Can I ask you, Jackie, we know that medievalists particularly recruit from universities and new recruits. They get a lot of new recruits, don't they? I mean, would you be able to say what would be appropriate for a new recruit? I mean, obviously, it would be the class thing involved in it, but for a new recruit coming in, wanting to do like bog standard and getting hats to start up with, what would be suitable?
Pretty much any of the simple style of hats that I showed you first. Steer clear of the Italian for now. We didn't have so much of that in this country. I just really like it as a hat, which is why I make them. But again, the square hats, the round hats, the acorn hats, we see so many images of them. They are everywhere. It's an everyman, everyday hat. By the late 15th century, the chaperon being worn on the head was pretty much out of fashion. You do see it slung over the shoulder with something like an acorn hat on the head itself, but yes, if you're coming in as kind of, you know, a billman type level fighter and you've got to have some soft kit, then you know, hose, shirt, doublet, short gown, and a simple hat, and you can't really go far wrong. Covers sort of every sort of person at every level, depending on your colour and the quality of the fabric. But yes, any of the simple hats that I've shown you, and a lot of it's down to taste. So,
Jackie, can I just ask about coifs as well in the 15th century? Because you see a lot of reenactors, men, wearing the simple linen coifs. And from my research, which is a few years out of date now, I'll admit, 15th century, that's kind of not really seen so much.
Not so much. Certainly there is a gap between about 1460 and 1485-ish, when they just vanished completely. Unless you were a doctor, a lawyer, a solicitor, or somebody trying to look kind of serious and therefore wearing old-fashioned clothes, they vanished. They came back again in the Tudor period, but at the end of the 15th century, they just disappeared. Prior to that, they were still being worn, but not so much. They were becoming old hat.
I guess that's just one of my favourite pet reenactorisms that just
I mean, they are terribly practical, and you know, in the summer when you do need to keep your head covered and you don't want to wear wool, they are much nicer. But that's, you know, then you ought to be seen in straw or just not seen in the sun at all. You know, unfortunately as reenactors we're stuck with being outdoors whatever the weather, but medieval people wouldn't necessarily have been. You know, now we don't go and stand on the street if it's throwing it down, so why would they have done, unless they had to. So whereas as we reenactors, we don't have buildings to go and disappear into, so yes, you have to match your clothing to the weather a little bit, but just thinner wools is best. So
what about the care of them? Because obviously you just talked about the weather and they got caught in a downpour. What about the care of some of these taller ones, you know? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, felt is always a very difficult thing, because when felt gets wet it tends to sort of start to sink out of shape a little bit. But the rest of them are pretty solid. You know, they can take being worn in the rain. In fact, although I have kind of modern woolly hats for when it's cold, my favourite go-to, particularly if it's raining, is one of the square hats, because it with the rolled up brim, it forms an extra kind of layer that the rain doesn't get in on, and the wool is water resistant if not waterproof, so they're pretty robust. You definitely wouldn't want to be seen in a silk covered hennin out in the rain, and wet silk veils. I mean, silk veils are not great outdoors. I mean, Jill might remember at Medieval Music in the Dales when I was wearing mine up at Bolton Castle. You know, every 5 minutes it suddenly get really foggy and then vanish again, as the wind blew it everywhere. But Yes, silk, definitely don't let it get wet. Silk watermarks terribly, but wool is incredibly solid and durable. You know, one of these could be out in the rain for a long time before it started to disintegrate in any way. And when I say long time, I mean years.
Yeah, with the few minutes we've got left, would you maybe try and tell the people what sort of events they might find you at? Because, you know, I have confidence we'll be back next year, so.
I certainly hope so. We've got, I mean, I'm a member of the Beauforts, and we've got a provisional event list for next year that's looking quite exciting. So in terms of trading, actually having the stall out and on display, I'm at TORM twice a year. I'm at Tewkesbury and Bosworth, and occasionally one or two others, Tatton usually if it's on, but otherwise not so much, but tends to live in the back of the van. So if I'm at an event, so is most of my stock, if I'm truthful. Yeah, so custom orders I can take wherever, because I've always got to take measure in the order book with me. But if you know that I'm going to be at a show, because as a reenactor I've found all sorts of places, just let me know and I can make sure to have whatever it is that you want to have a look at. But yes, I don't actually go out with the stall to set up and trade that many times a year. So TORM is usually your best bet. TORM, Tewkesbury and Bosworth to find me.
Right, and what sort of order book have you got at the moment? Is it, you know, if people wanted things for Easter, etc.?
Oh, but Easter's very easily possible at the minute. I'm currently, I mean, I never like to hold too long an order book, which kind of then means I'm, in order to get it all done, working very long hours. But I don't like people to wait for things. So actually at the moment I'm booked up till the end of January. And after that, moderately available. So,
but you have stock items. You have lots of stock items, don't you? Not showed your costume this time, but I know you have lots.
I don't have the space to put it out.
Yeah.
There just isn't the room for it. Well, so yes, I have 18 or 19 150-litre boxes of stock. Of which 6 are hats and everything else. Plus then there are rails full in the other room too that are just, it's everywhere. So feel free to take it off me. It's all, most of it's in the Etsy shop and the rest will be soon.
Excellent. That was great, Jackie. Thank you. Because, you know, I didn't know there was that many style of hats. I mean, you must have done some research to dig all them out.
I spend hours looking at pictures going, ooh, new hat. And I've got plans for a whole lot of ones for spring. So yeah, just keep watching this space. There'll be more of them, and I'll have more thousands of boxes full, and I'll need a bigger stall at TORM, man.
Oh, I'm sure we'll accommodate you. I'm sure we will. By the way, we've got expansion room in TORM for people that want to know now. We're going to use, we can get another 12, 14 traders in. We're going to use the studio, which we usually have the costume display in, because we've got a lot of traders that want to come in or want extra space or whatever. So, you know, the bigger and better and more selection we've got for our customers, it's obviously better for the traders as well, you know.
Absolutely. So. Well, more shopping for all of us, regardless of whether we're customers or traders. We like shopping.
I know. Well, thanks a lot, Jackie. That was really nice. And thanks for taking up your front room for us again.
Yeah, I've got to put it all down again now.
You have to go find your settee now, I think.
Yeah, I sold that room for everything else.
All right then. So
thanks very much.